is so beautiful. But I know the real reason you're here is the most amazing and wonderful Washington Science Fiction Association fan returnees, Joe and Gay Haldeman. It isn't often we get to honor our past members, and I do recall fondly a couple of years ago, we were at a convention, and you mentioned, Joe, that just love to get back up to get up to the DC area and visit, and we're like, we'll see what we can do to make this happen.
Great.
And I'm very happy that we have you back. And Gay, note that your microphone is off. I'm going to start off in the beginning. Gay has a wonderful article that talks about her history in fandom, and she may have mentioned how you and where you met. Why don't you guys talk a little bit about that, especially your first impressions of each other?
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Okay. We both worked on a Valentine's Day party, and I was in. Is that working? I was in Joke's Daughters, and he was in D-Malay, sort of half-heartedly, which are Masonic kids organizations. And we decided to have a joint Valentine's Day party. And so we both worked on it half-heartedly and decided to go and met each other at the party. And he knew all the older girls because he was 2 years older than I was. So I had a lovely time talking to him. He was so funny. And we just had the best time. And then he walked away, and I said, oh, well, that was fun. And pretty soon here he's back with a glass of, would you like some punch? Yes, I would. So we ended up having the best time at that party. Both of us had such a good time. We didn't find out for weeks that nobody else had a good time. I had earrings that pinched because I didn't have still don't have pierced ears. So he put them in his pocket for me, and of course forgot to give them back. So of course he called, and we started dating, and we're good together ever since.
Yep.
I was 15 and he was 17. We were kids.
Wasn't there a song about 15 and 17 or something like that in The Sound of Music?
Yeah.
So Joe, did you actually forget to give her back the earrings, or was that an excuse?
If you knew me, you wouldn't even ask. I forgot. I forget, as a rule.
I'd like to say I never forget anything. My wife will tell you that's absolutely not true. So you met as teenagers, and your relationship started, and how long after that was it that you got married?
Well, go ahead.
Let's see if he remembers.
Well, I knew it should be a trap. I went off to college, I guess right after that.
We met in February. He went to college in August.
Yeah. And we kept a pretty regular correspondence while I was in college. I was a very epistolator then. I kept up a regular correspondence with Gay and with a couple of my friends from high school. And this was before computers, you had to sit and type all that stuff, long-handed. And then I went off to Oklahoma, which makes no sense at all, does it? I mean, I was here in Washington, D.C. and Montgomery County, Maryland, and the center of the universe, actually, although I didn't know it at the time. And so I went off to Oklahoma. What? It's because my father went to Oklahoma for his bachelor's and later graduate school. And I could get in with resident tuition, which is almost nothing. And I thought, well, okay, I looked at the University of Oklahoma college catalog. I was so unsophisticated, I thought that if a course was in the catalog, that meant they offered it. Little did I know, they didn't offer any of them. They had one professor, and he taught problems in astronomy and problems in astrophysics, which were not available to freshmen and sophomores. So I sat around and I talked to the other students, but I got this new sense of freedom, as one does in college. It's suddenly no parents, nobody around who even knew me when I was a kid. I didn't realize I still was a kid. But, and here I was in this exotic land, Oklahoma, where they didn't even speak English. And now I'm in Florida, y'all, so I don't speak anymore either. But it was marvelous because, excuse me, I'm pounding on the floor again with my cane. But I started writing poetry, and I loved writing poetry, and I branched off into fiction pretty soon.
You started quoting Wordsworth to me. That was lovely.
Yeah.
That really helped.
Did he write you, has he written you a poem just for
I don't know
you?
if you've written it directly. I think early on, I think you probably did.
I think I did,
I
yeah.
don't remember really.
Yeah, I know I did because my brother was writing poetry too, and we were in sort of a competition.
But he came back that summer, and we spent the whole summer dating, and then he went off to college again. I was then a senior in high school. He told me I should date. I didn't want to, but I did. I dated a few times, and I said, they're not a joke. So when he got home, by that time, you'd already asked me to marry. When I was 16, you said, I want to marry you. And I said, don't say that. I was 16 years old, for Pete's sake. But then we went, my mother wouldn't let me go to Oklahoma. So I had to, he decided he would transfer, and transferred to University of Maryland. And we stayed together then. And
That was only partly romantic. I did start to realize that Maryland was a much better school
for astronomy
for
and
astronomy and almost everything.
Stars in your eyes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So we went to college together for 2 years in different majors. His advisor would not let him take Spanish, and I was a Spanish major. It broke my heart because I could have gotten him good grades in a foreign language. But it was not to be.
And my advisor would only let me take German and Russian. And I couldn't read the alphabet in Russian, so it was German. And I was not real good at it, but that's okay. Because when I finally wound up in Germany, they couldn't understand my accent.
So we got through college. We were married. We were in college 2 more years, and then we got married in Bethesda, nearby, just down the road.
Yeah, and I wrote this and that.
And then,
Yep, and then.
after 2 more years in college, he got drafted.
Yep, I got drafted and kept writing home. Kept writing to Gay almost every day.
I have the letters.
Yeah, she can.
That was my next question.
Yeah. And he wrote to his mother too every day.
Yeah. And I even found time to write some poetry and short stories because, as is true with almost anybody who writes for a living, at that period, I was a writing fool. You couldn't show me a pencil without my grabbing it. So.
And then he wrote a Conan novel that got blown up in a firefight.
Yeah. Well, good thing too.
So he had taken, in his last year of college, he'd taken a creative writing course, and the professor accused him of being a writer. Said, you write too well. You surely are already a published author, which he was not. He wrote 3 stories. He got home from Vietnam, he rewrote them, sent them out, and he sold 2 of them. Just like that. And we were off.
I was off. She was always better adjusted and more like a normal person.
I didn't have to go to war, that's why.
Yeah.
Fair statement.
Uh,
So, had any of your poetry been published before you sold the stories?
No,
Oh.
no. Oddly enough, I'm trying to think when my poetry was first published. I think it was after my stories started being published.
We sold a poem called Saul's Death to Omni magazine, slick magazine, good money. The editor said, "Don't tell anyone we buy poetry." This is a story. Well, it was a double sestina, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was clearly a poem, but that was her attitude. But it got a lot of good attention, that poem.
Yeah.
So, I believe this is what, 65 years of the anniversary? Just
60 years married, everybody. It's possible to do that.
so of course, what all of us in the room probably need to know is what advice do you have for people who are starting out their journey together?
Well, I should say it went by like plate comics. Slow but inevitable.
There's something to that.
Yeah. I don't know. I think one thing that seems necessary in hindsight for us is forgiveness.
Oh, yeah.
And, recognize that your mate is fallible, and just go, eh. It's not the world is full of other people who offer constant temptation. And if your mate is human, he or she will yield. That's just human nature. You can't expect a person to be superhuman and married at the same time. And, that doesn't require any detailing or anything like that. It's just, even if you were just living with this person and didn't have any romantic attachment at all, you would give that person elbow room. If you didn't, then there's something seriously wrong with you. I mean, quite. And of course, probably a large percentage of marriages are constrained by that, and they are connections which some of us would say were not sociable or even healthy. But there you go. I mean, that probably characterizes a large percentage of married people in this country, or whatever country we're in.
There's a lot of luck involved. That's
Oh yeah.
it's. We've been very, very lucky.
There's a lot of luck, but I think more forgiveness than luck.
And patience.
Yeah, you make your own luck.
So you're both pretty big personalities. You're both you both like to talk. Were you able to grasp the part about listening to each other early on as well, or was that something that took longer to learn?
I don't think so.
I think we had that to start with.
From that first party when you were having a great time and everybody else was like, what's going on here?
I think from childhood, I think that's the way I was brought up.
Me too.
I don't remember my mother ever expressing anything about, well, when you're raising children, do this, do that. I never heard anything like that. And in fact, my father never said anything like that at all. I think not even to his own analyst. No, he didn't have an analyst. They were too old-fashioned for that. Could have used a couple of them. He hired analysts.
Any thoughts on that, Katie? Or do you say it all?
I think he said it.
Yeah. All right. So, science fiction fans from way back.
No, yeah.
Who or what was the first science fiction story you read, if you can remember?
I don't.
She knows.
he gave me a book because he'd been reading science fiction all his life, and he handed me Arthur C. Clarke's Expedition to Earth, short story collection. Here, read this. And I read it, and I loved it. I really loved it. I didn't know it was a test. But it was a test. I don't know if it was deliberate or not, but then I fell right into Heinlein and Clarke and Asimov and whatever he put in front of me. Yes, I'll read that. And that was a binder for sure.
In my case, it was curious and sort of non-linear, but my father traveled a lot for the Public Health Service, and he went in and out of National Airport all the time. And to bring gifts to my brother and I, he would stop at the spinner rack with all these case-bound, the books which are sort of pseudo hardbacks. And most of them were science fiction. The ones that weren't were boys' adventures and girls' adventures and such. So I wound up with yards of bookshelf space full of the Golden Age authors. He didn't do this because he liked science fiction. He never read science fiction. I think it was purely marketing. I mean, they were right there. When you get off the plane, you got to get something to take home to your kids. There's a bunch of books that look healthy. Little do they know, it's full of subterfuge. I mean, the Winston juveniles were Clarke, Heinlein, Asimov, that gang. And they were running on 8 cylinders of avoidance. They were trying to write exciting, interesting stories that didn't have any sex or any communism or any kind of this or that, but were still interesting. And so they had sex right underneath the surface. They had politics right underneath the surface. And kids read right through the filter on the top of the page. And so my brother and I, we'd trade the books back and forth and talk about them and all. And I said, that would be when my brother and I were between the ages of 16 and 18, 19. Well, no, say 14 and 18 or 19. And then we both went off to college. We both went off to college with crates of books, mostly Winston juveniles, and the Ace doubles, which started coming out at 55 and 56. And so we got a huge liberal education in science fiction and fantasy. And otherwise, we didn't know shit. But then,
luckily, they were pretty educational.
Yes, we were training to be a science fiction writer. I think we were reading the right things. I don't know, we sort of educated each other with the Ace juveniles and the Winston juveniles providing our basic training. And that's where it goes. I mean, my brother wound up in the biological sciences and then wrote science fiction too. And I wound up in astronomy and astrophysics and wrote science fiction. But it all looked pretty much like Winston juveniles all the way.
I did read a story before then. It was the Bradbury story that was in Saturday Evening Post. I can never keep the name in my head, but it was mentioned earlier today about the guy who time traveled and you weren't supposed to hurt anything, but he stepped on a butterfly.
Sound of Thunder.
Sound of Thunder. And I read that before I met Joe and loved it, just loved it. So I was already primed. Joe read about the World Science Fiction Convention in DC in 1963, and we had a whole bunch of friends by then who read science fiction, and we said, let's all go down and see about this convention. So we all went down to the Sheraton, I think it was, or the Shore, and joined this convention as teenagers, no clue about what we were going to see. And met all these cool people, and went to all the panels, and went to the book room. And
Who are those?
Who were those first people you kind of met coming in the door, I think, at this kind of one?
Yeah.
remember who they were.
The names, it was it's in this article.
Oh,
The-
can you tell us who they were? 'Cause I forgot.
Unfortunately, I don't have the
Oh,
article.
yes, walked in the door, and there is Isaac Asimov and Ellsberg de Camp.
Oh,
But I didn't know who they were. There were two gentlemen in suits. And
Old men.
two old men.
They were teenagers.
We were teenagers, and they were fencing back and forth across the lobby, and that was our first exposure,
Yeah.
our very first.
So DisCon 1 was your very first science fiction convention
Yes.
for both of you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we didn't find out about WISFA, the Washington Science Fiction Association, until the following year, because we didn't know who put this on.
Yeah.
We went to the parties, we went home and we made costumes. Joe was the blind poet from Riesling from the Heinlein book, and I was the woman from 1984, had an anti-sex league button on. That got a lot of attention. And we both did some growing up there because we were both very shy. You wouldn't know that anymore. But we were both very shy, and I was extremely shy. But if you're the only woman, like there are 10-to-1 men, and they're being very nice to you and paying you a lot of attention, you get a little more confidence. So before too long, I was up on panels, and I was this shy little kid. And he was up on panels and hadn't sold anything, hadn't written much, and hadn't sold anything, and he was up on panels. So that was kind of cool.
My first story was in September 1968,
69.
69. So this was 5 years before my first story came out.
So the other aspect here is with having attended DisCon 1, they also attended DisCon 2 in the early 70s.
1974, Joe's brother was the chairman of it, and Joe was the program chairman of it.
And then, of course, in 2021 at DisCon 3, they were also in attendance, I
We
believe.
were
So,
there, yes.
so we have attendees of all three DisCons.
Yes.
So, having done some programming myself, how was that programming process for DisCon 2?
I was pretty scared. So, I don't know, I was fine with ordinary fandom and everything, but I had stage fright and I didn't like to stand up there and make a fool of myself. Now, of course, I make a fool of myself regularly.
We met Jim Henson because he was in the green room. He was on the panel of the programming.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who else we met that convention, but being on programming, you got to meet the guests and the big shots, and that was fun.
And they smooth up to it a little bit because they wanted to make sure to get on some good program items.
Yeah, that too.
Well, 72, 74, I was starting to be fairly active in the veterans outfit. And so at the conventions, the people who were in or headed for Vietnam pretty much found each other. And so that really helped me because I found other people who had the same spectrum of problems I was experiencing.
And fandom was very forgiving of him for having been a combat soldier, unlike the rest of society, some of which gave a lot of the veterans a hard time. He never had much
Show up in
exposure to
uniform
that.
and you could have people spit at you and curse you and that sort of thing. I was just drafted, man. I didn't ask to be this thing. Of course, there's nothing on your uniform that says this guy was drafted. All it
That's
says
right.
baby color, basically.
So since you kind of touched on a little bit, how long were you active? Were the two of you active in WISPA?
Till we left, so we started in about, here's a story for you.
Yeah, there's a story. She'll
We
tell
were-
it.
We went to University of Maryland. Joe's in a government politics class, and he falls over this woman's pile of books, and on top is analog. And he says, oh, I read that magazine, and they got to talking. She was turning away from a guy who was giving her a hard time. And she said, you know about WSFA, Washington Science Fiction Association? No, we don't. She gave us the information, invited us to go. We gathered Joe's brother, and we went down to our first WSFA meeting on a Friday.
Yeah.
And Joe's brother ended up married to this woman.
Science fiction that brings you together.
And he ended up being president of WSFA for six years. And I was secretary for 6 years, I think. And Joe had various jobs.
I was hanging on for years and years.
You were Gay's husband?
Right.
And we worked hard on the conventions, and we did the disclaves, and they were fun. One memory is going into the hotel and warning the guy at the desk that these crazy people were going to come in and they were going to wear costumes and not to be upset. And he laughed, and he pulled out this pile of books. Our guest of honor was Robert Silverberg, and he said, I'm just waiting for Mr. Silverberg. That was great.
Yeah, that was a whole year's output from.
I'm sure it wasn't only 6 months.
No, it wasn't 6 months.
Hold on, did it have some of this adult stuff?
I don't know. My dad.
So obviously, since that first DisCon, you guys have attended a couple of conventions.
Yeah.
And you've had an opportunity to meet and interact with a lot of people, fans, authors, artists, etc. Not to put you on the spot too much, but who would you say outside of the DC area, in your family, of course, who would you say has been like the best friendship you've developed over those years? Yeah, no putting no pressure on you.
Gordon Dixon.
Gardner Dixon for me.
Robert Silverberg. Leonard
And
Niven. Anne McCaffrey.
Geez, it's not like there's a list of the top authors in the world here.
Well, actually, Robert Heinlein, although,
Robert Heinlein.
you know, he was insulated by Virginia, sort of protected from fandom. But he sought me out because he read the Forever War.
And liked it.
Liked it, so. And to me, that's a tremendous eye-opening thing about Heinlein, because why would he like a left-wing anti-war novel at all? Why would he read to the end of it? But he told me he read it twice.
I wasn't with Joe when he met Mr. Heinlein, but I got a phone call. He said, Robert Heinlein saw me across the room and got up and came over and introduced himself and said how much he liked the Forever War. And Joe's feet did not touch the ground for another month, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I remember that phone call.
Always remember your first, right?
Yeah. Another first, one Christmas, he had sold his very first novel, War Year, which is not science fiction, but was about his Vietnam experience. And we finally gotten the money. I didn't know this. I came in from work, and he has taken the little white Christmas cookie he had on the table, and he's put $50 and $100 bills all in the tree. I'll never forget that tree. That was his first advance.
Rang the jingle bells if you walked in. What's this?
Christmas, yay!
So I mentioned this yesterday when I saw you that I was going to ask this question. Both of you have won some major awards and you've been recognized. Can you kind of explain to people what that felt like and what that means to you and what it meant to you and still does?
Tell them about winning your first Hugo when we're sitting in.
Well, when I won the first Hugo, I actually went out and spent $100 on a suit. I didn't know I'd won, of course. I shouldn't say of course, because sometimes the winners do know well at the time. But I didn't know that. I just thought I might win because I was nominated. And I bought this $100 suit. And so it was the most expensive suit I had
ever had.
And so some kids grabbed me and threw me in the pool. You
But
know,
unfortunately, I started crying. I was more worried about his wallet, actually. But it was fine. And it didn't hurt to see he
no,
came through it, and it's a story now.
yeah. But it was interesting because I used to drink as well, so I was used to the company of boozers. And so I was surrounded by a bunch of drunks. I said, okay, party time. But then they picked me up and threw me in the pool. I said, wait, you don't understand the rules here.
When he got his first Hugo, people started trying to get to him, and they pushed me against a wall. Some guy pushed me against a wall. So I said, I'm not going to live the rest of my life like this. So I grabbed the Hugo. I carried it around the rest of the night because they weren't going to do that. And besides, it was dangerous. It was very pointy.
Great point.
And it was a wonderful thing to do. I mean, the win, it
Yeah.
was just great for him to start winning those awards.
Yeah.
It was just great. And then it started selling books. And
Even better.
that was a
Yeah.
good thing. Well, just as good.
No, Gay, on the other hand, you recently, well, relatively recently.
Relatively recently.
We don't count the COVID years, they just
Yeah.
mess with everything. But you won the Big Heart Award.
I did.
And that's,
That is usually given for service to fandom. Running conventions, registration and stuff, and all the stuff I had done. And I'm just friendly. And I helped to mentor quite a few young writers. They're scared to talk to Joe sometimes, but they'll talk to me. So that's been very positive. And the Big Heart Award is not warned about. So I'm in the audience at the Hugos with no idea that I'm going to win this award. So I had to get up, go all the way down through this big audience to get up on the stage, trying to, what am I going to say, what am I going to say, what am I going to say? Dave Kyle hands me the award and kind of pushes me away, so I just said, thanks. And that was it. I didn't get a chance to say anything, but I was just as glad because my brain was empty. I did not expect to get that award, and I really appreciate it.
so, in some ways, you guys have been a team for decades and building each other up. But not everything can be done together. So what are some jobs that you've had in the past that what was your first job? What was the first time what's the first thing you did to get paid money for?
I worked in a real estate office. No, that was not the first. I went down to Ocean City and taught it, and was a waitress at Billy's Sub Shop from 3 a.m. to 11 a.m. every night, no breaks. And I was 18 years old. And I don't for the life of me know why my mother let me do this. And I had to ride a bicycle to the sub shop in the middle of the night. So one of the first nights, I rode up to the boardwalk, and then I'm walking down the boardwalk with my bicycle, and the cop stops me, and he says, "What are you doing out here in the middle of the night?" And I said, "I've got a job. I'm going down to Billy's." He said, "Well, I will meet you every night here at 2:30 in the morning, and I will walk you down there." Bless his beautiful blue eyes. And he did. Every night he would meet me and take me down, and he probably saved me from bad stuff that I had not ever thought of. But I met some interesting people. Anyway, the prostitutes would hang out there, so I learned a lot. Just watch it. Just watch it. What was your first job?
Well, I had a data processing job as a college student, basically, just doing
Key
work.
punch.
Key
You
punching.
did key punch. What a passe job.
Yeah, boy.
I think we moved beyond that point.
And then I I had a job coding with the astronomy department where I was a student. And that was basically just taking meter upon meter of graph paper and interpolating the lines that were this way, put them on coding sheets, and then typing them in, and somebody in the next office would change those into equations. And it was all extremely romantic. What else was I doing then?
You worked for the Public Health Service?
Yeah, that's right. I was, oh my God. I was a nameless bureaucrat for the Public Health Service. And basically, me and this other guy sat at Frieden calculating machines. I don't know whether you've ever used those, but it's like a big, noisy, mechanical calculator, the size of no business machines that big exist anymore, but it was about the size of a huge, loud pig. And you punch it in and go, ka-chong, and so the other guy was a jazz drummer, and I was playing a Dixieland band. So we had lots to talk about besides the numbers, and we found that you could calculate the repeating fractions, repeating decimals, and make syncopated drum machines, so we tell each other about our discoveries there. And it was fun. The funny thing is, now, I was 17 when I started, and I was very unsophisticated in certain things, like dope. And I didn't know that he was a real drug addict. And he didn't bring it up. I mean, it's not something that was so openly discussed at the time. And he was just speeding all the time. So it made a very interesting companion for lunch and such. But he was a lovely guy, and sort of eased me into whatever there was for adults to do in Washington, D.C., which is about what they do now. Bars, yeah. And he was only in his early 20s, and he was gay, but this is a time when he absolutely hid that.
Did not tell anyone.
No. He didn't even tell me, although we were pretty close friends, and he didn't want to bring it up because it would complicate things, But otherwise, he was very friendly. And the other group workers told me, "Don't you know he's a faggot?" And I'm going, "What?" And I'd go, "That's his business, isn't it?" And, which was a fairly unusual attitude at the time.
Back in the 60s, yeah.
But we were, I don't know, science fiction. We knew a lot of homosexual guys and a few lesbians, and say, who gives a shit?
But you each his own.
Yeah, we were not that primitive back in the 60s.
So then he went to Vietnam
Yeah.
and was a combat engineer for a year, half of which he spent recovering from wounds in country.
I would write to my parents from Vietnam, and I would write to my father with his military
Dear
title.
Admiral Haldeman.
He was a rear admiral, and he had an office in the public health building. And, so I write with his rank because you want your mail to go where it's supposed to. And one of the guys back in Vietnam looked at that and he says, "Your father is an admiral?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "What the fuck are you doing here?" It had never occurred to me. I said, "Well, what do you mean?" If your father was a master sergeant, you could get out of this fucking job. And I said, "No, he couldn't." But I should have known, yes, you could. One time when I had a R&R, rest and recreation, to get out of Vietnam for 2 weeks to go meet Gay in Hawaii. I lost it because a guy had bribed the clerk $100.
Oh.
And
We were already in San
We were-
Francisco.
yeah.
We were gonna go to Baycon in '67, his mom and I, and then go on to Hawaii and meet Joe, yay.
But I was naive enough about the military that I did not pay somebody to protect my R&R. Because if I had spent $100, I would have gone to Hawaii. No,
That was a heartbreaker.
yeah, but it was an education.
Wasn't it education?
Sometimes education is painful, but you know, in a way, I can see through this reverse telescope the time travel that we all do a day at a time. It's probably not a bad thing. Because if I had been protected by my family from combat, I wouldn't have known as much about combat as I do now.
He wouldn't have gotten the forever war out of it, yay.
Yeah, and I probably would have fewer holes in my body too. I was very nearly killed in Vietnam, a couple of times, but the most important times were just this one incident when I was crossing a field with my arms full of high explosives, and a mine went off under my feet. And I was lucky that not much went off, because I was holding it like this, and it just exploded all over me. But I had one 50 caliber machine gun bullet pointed down, it went through my leg. That was the bad one. But
Yeah.
then another, they had, I forget the number, 50 some shrapnel pieces they had to extract and surgery. And
And he still has quite a few of them.
yeah, well, they, you know, they're just, they jingle when I go to the x-ray, but
TSA has one.
Yeah, really.
He does it anyway. In the Soviet Union, he set off the machines,
Yeah.
but in the US, he's not set off the machines in a very long time.
that was an interesting bit of international diplomacy, because I set off this x-ray machine in Moscow, or no, it was,
It's Moscow.
yeah. And they said, what is that? What is that? And I said, oh, that's just a bullet wound. And all these guys suddenly, they're paying attention now. It was 3 in the morning. They were just all asleep. Oh, you have a bullet? Oh yeah, it's right there in the magazine in my secret pocket. Well, it was interesting. Now, to not quite half segue, but going to the Soviet Union was an eye-opener. It's always an eye-opener for,
What year was that?
that was
90, wait,
83.
when I'll tell you. It was 83.
83. And we were in fairly detente circumstances with the Soviet Union at the time.
They invited some science fiction writers up. The Writers Union invited some science fiction writers
Yeah.
over. And the guy who put the thing together filled the tour up with non-science fiction writers.
Yeah.
So that he had have enough people so he could bring his wife for free. So we didn't find that out. But we did get to spend time with Octavia Butler,
Yeah.
which was a joy, and a lot of time with Roger Zelazny. That was a joy, and that was some of the high points of the trip.
Roger was, of course, a very well-known science fiction writer in the States. In the Soviet Union, he was not that well known, but he did all sorts of things that were cool. He could take it, he carried a loop of string that was about that long, call it 18 inches, 20 inches long. And he could do cat's cradles of any description. He had all these different things he could do. And he'd just go like that, and then go boing, boing. And
It's great.
he got, the Russians loved that, but the Russian children especially.
Oh, yeah.
He was
Yes.
great with the kids. But he had a Slavic name, so they already knew who he was.
Yeah.
We were in the Writers Union in a big circle, and the Americans were in a circle, and then the Russian writers were behind us and around. And one of them came by and tapped Joe on the shoulder and said, Mr. Forever War.
Yeah.
We have gotten to travel quite a bit because of science fiction, because we've gotten invitations all over the place.
Yeah.
And of course, foreign fans come to the US and you get to know them, and then they get to know his work, and then they invite us. And I speak Spanish pretty well. So he was guest of honor at the World Science Fiction Convention in 1990 in The Hague. And we took this nice bicycle trip, and it was wonderful. And we get to the convention, and I'm standing outside, I guess it was outside the green room, and I see these young men, and they're speaking Spanish, so I eavesdropped. They're the editors of BEM magazine, which is the locus at that time of Spain. So I took a deep breath. I had not used my Spanish in years, and I introduced myself. And I said, would you like to meet the guest of honor? So I took them in and introduced them to Joe and the other guests of honor, Harry Harrison and who was it? Wolfgang Jeschke from Germany. And
The Brunners.
no, they weren't guests. And then I helped them translate and interview the guests. And I remember them interviewing George R.R. Martin, who was not yet very famous. And that was a blast. And they became good friends. And we went over later and stayed with them. And now they're practically family. We just love them. And they still don't speak English.
Well, why should they?
Poor Joe.
So before we open up to the audience for questions, you know, at some point people might want to know a little bit about your writing and editing process. If you could kind of talk us through what you guys do.
I sit with a fountain pen and write. I mean, I do. Over the past 50 years, I've tried various ways to make it easier. And I think most writers go through a constant kind of exploration to how you can reduce the actual intellectual labor. There are a couple of, if one sat down to write an essay about this, one could say, well, there are 3 ways, or 4 or 5,
Well,
to turn your thinking into a book. The one that comes up in writing magazines is whether you're a pantser. That is, do you write by the seat of your pants? Or do you write by some other article of clothing? I don't know.
Panzers and plotters.
Well, I came across pantser, and nobody said plotter. I said, pantser? Pantser? What, you write on your pants leg or what? You know, it's not obvious that it's writing by the seat of your pants. And then so it was semi-explained, and I thought, well, what the hell does that actually mean? I mean, writing by the seat of your pants means you don't have a method? Does it mean you don't think? I wrote many books by outlining to a certain level of the book. I rarely outlined the whole book, but I'd write enough so that I could write enough of an outline that I could do 50 pages or 60 pages of it, you know? And then I was committed. I had to write that. But then I got a contract with Pocket Books where they had to have an outline of the whole fucking novel. I had to write a novel, write an outline, and then a book. And they said, yeah, that's the way people do it. Excuse me, that's not the way I do it. But I said, okay. So basically, I sat down and I wrote. I was on the train from New York down to Florida, and I was on manual typewriter, and I just typed up this whole damn thing, you know. And it worked okay. Worst book I ever wrote, but, or maybe the second worst I ever. But then I sat down and I sort of filled in the blanks, and wrote the dialogue and everything like that. But the result of the book, which is called Attar's Revenge, yeah, it's got my title.
And it was written under the name Robert Graham, if you can find it. And I think it's a hoot, but I am a little.
Well, I thought it was a hoot, but it's not much of a novel. For a hoot, it's pretty much a hoot. But for those of you who eat at Hooters, it's your kind of thing. But basically, you know, it was a turning point for me. I forget how old I was, but I was old enough to know better. And I went to a Milford conference while I was doing this. A Milford conference is, you know, a roundtable discussion with writers, a writers' workshop where the writers have been invited by.
They're all professionals.
Yeah, by that, at that time, Kate Wilhelm and Damon Knight invited people. And so I went there, and I was doing the thing, which is passing manuscripts around in comedy. And I got a phone call. We're out in the middle of nowhere, upstate New York or Michigan. And somebody says, "You've got a phone call." That means somebody called me on the payphone outside in the field. So I went out there and said, "Is this Joe Haldeman?" And I said, "Yes." And "Is Joe Haldeman who wrote the Forever War?" "Yes." And he says, "I want you to write 12 books for me. And I'll pay you an advance of $24,000. I'm going, well, I knew who was on the other side of that. That was the devil talking. I said, you know, I can smell the sulfur through this fucking phone. But I said, let me talk to my wife about it, which is always a good strategy. And I went into this company assembled, I guess about 20 writers. And they said, well, who was that? They knew it was a call from New York. And I said, this guy wants me to write a dozen novels for him. And they go, yay! And I'm going, wait, come on. This is the worst news I've ever had.
But it's money we needed.
Yeah, we were broke. And so I said, well, you know, how hard could it be? Really. And yet, it was pretty hard. So we went down to Ocean City, Maryland, and I wrote on this thing and actually kind of loving it. Type. I had this lovely old 1929 Royal portable. I just loved pounding on it and doing my writerly thing. And actually, 2 novels I wrote that way were pretty much fun. The third I never finished. We cashed the check, the half check that I got. But I just said, fuck this. I mean, capital F2S. And I knew I'm a commercial writer, but I'm not that commercial, basically, that's all it is. And so I wrote the guy and said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. And by that time, he was either dead or very sick, and his wife, his widow, wound up processing that thing. But it was extremely valuable, because when I'd written, I don't know, 6 books, something like that, 5 or 6 books, and I thought you start with a stack of paper and you write until you've got a book, and then you send that off to New York. And, you know, it's not that hard a job. You just, you know, it's just pulling your guts out of typing one. But then I'd also gotten accepted to the Iowa Writers Workshop, where I had to study writing and try to teach people from a theoretical basis what you actually get, basically, from your guts. And that involves making up a lot of shit that isn't true. But listen to this. What is the description of what a fiction writer does? He writes shit that isn't true. And so this is a way to do it and get paid for it and, you know, pay your taxes and be an actual citizen writing shit that isn't true. And so, wow, it was a great revelation, and I wound up getting accepted to the Iowa Writers Workshop, where I found 170 people who were at college, getting paid by the college to pretend to be studying how to make up shit in the church. And, you know, and they had professors saying, oh yeah, that's right, let's do this now. This is a very good way to make a living. You're not wasting your life and everybody else's time.
We're just about out of time, but I wanted to say that my part of all this is not to edit, although I do read and catch typos and comment, but my job is to handle everything but the writing. Deal with the editors. Deal with the agents. Make sure he has enough coffee. Make sure he takes his pills. And that's my job. My job is to do all that.
So, the wonderful thing about Joe and Gay is they have great stories. The sad thing about it is that you just want to let them tell their stories, which means that sometimes you run out the clock. And we are at 2:56. So I apologize to the audience for not allowing you to have questions. Fortunately, Joe and Gay are around the rest of the weekend, and we'll be back in this room tonight for the mass autographing and signing. And if you have questions, they'll be more than happy to take a little time with you and do that. So thank you all for being a wonderful audience, and have a wonderful rest of the night.